In 1988, Miriam Delicado had a contact experience with tall, blonde extraterrestrials who were involved in the creation of humanity and rescuing large number of humans at the end of different historical ages. They intervened in huge spacecraft or space arks, and they are back again, or we are waiting for them to resurface in these cataclysmic times. She's the author of Blue Star Fulfilling Prophecy, and she's here today to take us into this incredible adventure into what is going to happen during these end times.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, welcome, Miriam, back to Exopolitics Today.
Thank you for having me, Michael. I'm so pleased to be here, and I can't wait to have this conversation. We're going to get into some pretty interesting things today, for sure.
Well, there's just so much happening. So how's it feel being back in the public arena? Because I know our last interview, that was the first interview you've done in a few years. Now people are contacting you. So how does that feel? And what's been the general reaction from people learning that you're back and talking about these topics?
It's been interesting because I think that I've grown personally and spiritually myself in the last few years. So I'm having a lot of fun rebuilding my my work that I'm sharing with the public. What's very different about it this time is that I'm finding that the information, what I have always felt as being the most important parts of the information, I'm actually able to convey to people today, whereas I couldn't in the past because they were just disengaged from it or not ready for it, or not understanding the power of the information that was actually available to them. So it's been fantastic, and I've had so many people from all over the world, many of them your followers as well, who have contacted me, and it's been an amazing experience coming back into the public. It's been great.
Yes, definitely we're in a different era, and people are paying attention now and wanting to know what is going on. But so it's very good to have you back to share your experiences. Now, your contact experiences, the ones that really stood out in our last interview were the one that happened in 1988 with the tall blonde extraterrestrials. So I guess the question is, are you still in touch with them? Do they still communicate with you in any way, or have you had more recent contact experiences with them?
I have never had the same level of contact as I did in 1988, where they physically came down with a craft and had that physical interaction. But I have, over the years, constantly had sightings and interactions through my dreams or my visions that have been very, very, very powerful. And I have seen not craft, but I've seen orbs, the light orbs that so often looks like stars. I've seen those on a number of occasions. And usually when I have a sighting like that, it's almost, for me, it's almost at, and strangely enough, it's almost at a crisis moment for myself. That's what I've noticed. And it's like reinforcing me to say, no, Miriam, we're still with you. Don't worry. Everything's fine. Keep going. We are watching. We're here. Just continue. And I still have, if I go into a deep meditation, I can reach levels of being able to communicate with them, but it's not on a regular basis because there's a bit of complexity there about reaching out and having that direct communication with them, because it's not something that I play with. It's very serious for me. So yes, there's communication. I've had messages, dreams are very powerful when they come, very realistic, and there can be messages or instructions given to me. It's not on a weekly basis or anything like that. It's sort of as needed. And on that note, something interesting that I think your audience will want to hear about this is that when I was given the information that they downloaded me with in 1988, they told me that many things would sort of be released in my own mind at the right moment when I needed it. And so that process has continued to happen. I'll all of a sudden be doing something that's kind of irrelevant, and then all of a sudden I'll get a massive download about what it is that maybe I need to do, or an education about a specific area of ufology or spirituality that all of a sudden becomes exceptionally clear and better understood even by myself. So there's lots of layers to that question.
Actually, that's a very good point. I actually spoke with Alex Collier well over a decade ago, where he said something very, very similar, that when he had his contact experiences with the Andromedans, that they downloaded him with a lot of information, and he said that the information that was downloaded into him was kind of like holistic, and they said, don't worry, you're not going to remember all of this, but at the right time, it'll be there for you. And it sounds like it's a very similar process. And the way Alex explained it to me was that the information that they have is almost like a gestalt. It's a gestalt. It's a whole. And he described it as, being able to look at the information like from different angles, like you're looking at a crystal.
Wow, that's. I just so that people know, I haven't studied other people's contacts or read books from other people's contacts. So I know just a little bit about the different people that are out there. And one of the reasons I did that was to try to keep my own information clear within myself. And I'm going to be clear. I want to be clear about this, to keep my own sanity. Okay. Because otherwise I would question myself constantly. So that's fascinating that you're sharing that about Alex, because that is exactly how it works. There is imagery, because that's how the mind remembers most things. It's through imagery. And then it is through this sort of almost holographic understanding. And you get to be able to see not just all the different perspectives when you think of it, let's say this way, but it becomes the perspectives from the different dimensional levels as well. So you're getting it from everywhere. So when you do have those moments of download, quote, clarity, it can actually be very overwhelming and take time in order to filter through it in your current state of mind, so that you can process it clearly and without confusion, because sometimes it can be confusing for a short time until you sort of analyze the data, let's say. So yeah, that's very interesting. It's good to know.
Yeah, one of the other things that I hear from people who have these encounters with different extraterrestrials is that sometimes the encounter takes place on a higher density. And when you come back to this density, our third density, it's very hard to remember. And I guess that maybe is why it's like these gestalts are like embedded into the consciousness, so that when the right time comes, then bang, information is there. But yeah, that sometimes people can come back from these experiences and like not remember too much, because it happened in 5D and they're here in 3D, and their mind is not really able to make that shift easily.
One of the things that I know for a fact, okay, is that our brains are part of the most important construct that we have in the relationship to everything in the here and now. And so the brain has the capacity to be able to filter through all of that information very, very rapidly and very clearly. However, because we're not using all of the pathways of our brain, in other words, we're using a smaller portion of our brain, we're not able to compute. It's like thinking about a computer, right? If you're trying to do something in high definition and you have a really lousy cell phone, you're not going to get a high definition video, for example. It's exactly the same concept with our brains and the information that these beings give to us, as well as being able to process that information in and have clarity at the end of it. That's why I always tell people that, this happened 36 years ago, and I'm still processing it. I'm still processing it. And if we don't take the time as spiritual beings, okay, to focus on ourselves, to be able to process the information, we're not going to be able to download and receive even more. So, and also the fact that, it's a proven fact that you can look at something. There can be 5 people looking at a UFO, and one of them might not see anything at all because their brain literally has no concept to be able to process that information. So that's really also a very big part of what happens. And that if those individuals over time that don't remember what happened to them, if over time they build their brain muscle, their spiritual brain muscle, by meditation and understanding how energy works, they will start getting those micro downloads, or even the macro download of remembrance of what it is that took place during the contacts. It's not as though they can't tap into it. It's a matter of how do they get there.
Okay. Now, one of the things that we really didn't touch on, but I am fascinated by it, is the tall blondes that you met. They spoke about them playing a role during previous eras, like the end of different ages, in evacuating large numbers of people in these massive spacecraft, or some might say space arks. So you want to explain what you were told about that?
Well, in that third world that they spoke of, there were massive, like just huge craft that were, to say that it was a city on a craft is not even tell you the extent of how big they were, right? It's like mini planets almost, everything is encompassed there. And what I was told was that some of the people that were on the Earth were taken off planet, and they ended up being on these mega craft, these space arks, call them as you like. But this is what happened. And these human beings existed there and commingled and everything else. But when those individuals were brought back to the planet, their minds were cleared of that, so that they wouldn't have the mental fight in the mind, okay, of being able to live in those two realities at the same time. You can't actually do that, because the energetic of being there with them, the energetic of being here on the Earth, is very, very different. So your mind would constantly be in a level of chaos if it was remembering that, and you would not be able to function here emotionally. You would not be able to function here. So this is how, and I'm just making my own assessment and observation and my thoughts here, but I believe that would be how a lot of the stories of the mystical stories of the past were created as a result of these beings, because there would have had to have been a level of remembering. And that's, I think, where a lot of our mythology comes from, and a lot of our historical true stories come from, is based on that action of when they came to in the assistance of cleansing the planet that took place, and then bringing humanity back to the Earth. Again, it's a highly complex storyline, and one that, again, in the beginning, I had this information, but it took time for me to sort of understand and put together the ability for me to express it more clearly to the public, because these are massive concepts, and they have to do with how our human history relates to another species, potentially, or more than one, and then relates to interdimensional worlds and life itself. So, huge concept, huge. And lastly, what I would say about these craft is that, and I want to make this really clear, if there is a point where this Earth is in such jeopardy, or even all of human life is in such jeopardy of being wiped out, they would come back. But they will not come back and quote, they're not going to save us. It's not happening. That's not what that's not what it is about. I knew that for 36 years. They're not coming here to say, oh, yeah, let's go. We got to go somewhere. That's not happening. It's only if the planet or humanity is threatened.
I wanted to share something that Dolores Cannon talked about in one of her books, The Convoluted Universe. And she described the process where these giant ships would show up, or space arks would show up, and that there would be more than one. It would be like during this cataclysmic period where the Earth is about to undergo some severe Earth changes, they show up all over the planet. And we're talking dozens of huge space arks, and that people that volunteer, or people that chose to go up, they were asked, do you want to be saved? Something bad's going to happen. If you do, then come on these arks. And obviously not everyone chose to do that, but the ones that did choose to do that, they went on these huge arks, and then they left. And in the arks, they were gone for what seemed to them like several days, just a few days. And then they would be brought back to the Earth, but the Earth was completely cleansed. Like it was like centuries or even thousands of years had passed, and the Earth was now cleansed and ready for a restart. So, yeah, I mean, is that pretty much the way it works?
Let me think about that for a moment. Well, let me talk about time first and how time works, okay? Time travel, of course, they produce time travel. They can create time travel. And one of the ways in which time travel happens is it's really complicated. And at the same time, it's pretty simple for them. When you go from point A to point B, if you're going to go from one place in the universe to the other on the other side, you think that it's a straight line. And in your mind, you think it's a straight line. But in fact, it could actually be a way of getting there would be folding space over and over and over again. And so that's why, and it has to do with, let's call it light energy. If you get to the core of a molecule, okay, that I call it the God particle. When you get to the core of it, and humanity is not even close to getting there, you have a type of energy that is so powerful and moves so fast that it creates the folding of space and time. It's not just from point A to point B. It's also the time that takes place. So while you're in that movement, you're going so fast that everything else is in the fixed position over here is going very slowly. It's just putzing along. It's taking its time. and you are moving so fast that there's no change in yourself or in the, let's say, the craft that you're in, but the actual fact is that time has passed in other places. So if they were taken from point A to point B and then brought back again, for example, time would have passed. It's very complicated. I don't think I'm explaining it very well, but there is that possibility that there was a time difference in terms of how long they thought that they were on a craft or with these beings, and how much time had passed in space. Time is almost irrelevant because, and I've said this all these years, that the past, the present, and the future are all happening now, and we can actually change the past with certain things by doing this folding of space. And it's not just human beings and craft that can do it. Entire solar systems can actually move through these it's almost like an interdimensional world that we go through, and because everything around whatever it is that's moving is existing out of time and space. And it has to do with that, what I call the God particle, the particle that of energy that exists in everything that there is. And it also controls everything, and it's what creates everything. It's what destroys everything. And at the heart of that particle, when you get into the very, very center of it, that's where the power is. And that's what takes us into this storyline of time travel, and also not just time travel, but also perceptual distance travel. I don't know if that made any sense.
Okay, I'm just very interested in the whole God particle and the power within it and the transformative potential there. Is that a process where individuals learn to be able to communicate with their own bodies at a kind of cellular level, or even going to smaller levels? Because I think that seems to me to be the way in which we can achieve, like longevity and transformation and all of these other things that people talk about, Merkabahs and all of that. That at some point we learn how to communicate at a cellular level or even smaller. So is that what we're talking about with the God particle? I mean, is the God particle like in every cell in our body, and we're communicating with all of that?
Michael, you just made me like you even more because you got it.
Okay.
It's exactly what it is. The God particle is what makes up every human being and everything else around us. It is, I call it the God particle because it is the only particle that cannot be fully destroyed. Okay? So, for example, when we think of ourselves as this human body, these can be transformed. They're not necessarily destroyed, but they can be completely transformed. The God particle remains in its existence. It's not being transformed. It's the brick and mortar of the building blocks of all life. If you are able to communicate with that light within every single one of the particles, that's where and how you are able to communicate with your body and with your mind, with the world that is around you, because that God particle is in everything. It's even in the air that's around us. That's how small it is. It's so tiny that you can't even grab it, but it's there, and it's a particle, and it's called I call it the God particle. So yes, that is how a certain level of you can communicate with your body, but it's not easy. I mean, I'm testament to that, even with all of the gifts that I have. But I was able to work with that particular energy to make it so that I wasn't crippled okay, from my car accidents in 2006, so that I was able to regain the ability to speak, to swallow, to turn my head, to blink my eyes without the most excruciating pain imaginable to any human being. I mean, I've come a long way, and I use that energy and that communication to reprogram my brain and then also work on healing myself. And so there is that ability to do it, but there are universal laws that take place here as well. And so universal laws are set laws that you cannot break. They are defined by the existence itself. So if an individual, for example, is attempting to work with a God particle in a way that was not predestined, or the existence itself has said, okay, it's time for you to leave this planet, you need to go, this is what you agreed on, this is what you wanted, you're not going to be able to work with that God particle. But for the most part, you do have the opportunity to communicate with the God particles that exist around us, and that's partly how, quote, miracles can happen. And for myself, the process for me was the car accidents, then I had a bad gut infection, then I ended up getting cancer on my shoulder from the gut infection, and I'm through all of that, yay. But what happened to me was I ended up in Mexico, and they told me that I had cancer on my liver, and I was like, no way, like this is, no. First of all, I said no. And then what I did was for 2 days, I had a conversation with my God, my creator, myself, and I asked for the God particle. I brought in the God particle into my body, and I saw it going into my liver, and I visualized that God particle, that light. It's golden light, reflective golden light that is so bright, but yet you can still look at it. Yeah, beautiful imagery there, yes. And so the golden light, what happened was I kept bringing it into my liver and seeing that and seeing it and seeing it, and it would come in and then it would partially go, and then it was doing this for about a day and a half. On the second day, all of a sudden, I felt this energy, this powerful energy move into me. I saw it go into my liver, and then it just lit up and it stayed. And then I heard a voice say, it's done. And I thought, okay, that's it. It's done. And I thought, okay, I don't need to worry now. And when I went in and I had surgery in Mexico. When I had that surgery, they were shocked because they came back and they said it was not cancerous. So the God particle can actually transform energy, especially within our human bodies. It's actually a very powerful energy to work with when we are creating and transforming ourselves as human beings and our existence and our operating system within our minds in relation to the other worlds. That's why you'll often hear very powerful manifestors talk about the golden light to bring it in. It's because they're working with the God particle.
Fascinating. I have been doing these hyperbaric oxygen chamber therapies. I've done about 8 so far. And the last couple that I've done, I could feel the oxygen actually going into the cells of the body. And so I could visualize it. It was like a clear visual. And it was like this light, I mean, the oxygen representing, I guess, light, something pure, going into cells that, over the course of many decades, like they're getting a little lethargic, or they're loaded up, whatever. And it's almost like I could visualize, I could see like the cell just like sucking in that purity, that light, and just being transformed. And I imagine, is it a kind of, and I was feeling that in the body, because, in the hyperbaric oxygen chamber therapy, you're literally sitting in there like for an hour and a half, and you're just and you're just breathing in oxygen, pure oxygen at a high pressure, and it is just being absorbed by the body. And so there's a physiological process, but there's also like a visual process, and I was seeing it. So, while I didn't see golden light, I saw something that is like, there's a purity, a cleansing, and a transformation happening of these tired old cells, like being filled with oxygen and purity, and like, being vivified. So I don't know. It seems, because I think maybe, in the days that are coming, in the decades that are coming, maybe it's not so much us being cured by these advanced holographic med beds and all of that, but many of us learn how to heal ourselves by going into the cells, in communicating with the God particle, and that's how we heal ourselves.
Just this morning, I was writing for my newsletter this week, and I was talking about disclosure a little bit. Okay, so this kind of ties in. So, God particle and disclosure, and what I was expressing in this article that I was writing is that the most powerful information that comes from, quote, extraterrestrials is not actually about the craft and what they look like, but it is more about the information of who we are, how we're existing, how we have the potential to exist, okay? And remembering that we are these multidimensional beings that can tap into this powerful technology and be able to use it to manifest, quote, miracles. But here's the thing, is it really a miracle? Because a miracle implies that it is coming from the impossible. And I would say miracles are actually the manifestation of that God particle type of energy, where there's massive transformation or change or manifestation that takes place because you are able to understand the God particle, how it works, and that energy of how it relates to everything around you. And so the fact is that as we grow spiritually, people are becoming more youthful, because whether they are consciously or subconsciously recognizing it, they are bringing in more of that energy of God's source, and they are also bringing in more of the energy that, quote, revives revives the physical bodies that they have on an energetic level. So when you're breathing in the oxygen in a hyperbaric chamber, for example, you're giving the recipe in order to activate this very center core of the cells that you have. So you have a cell, and it needs oxygen. It needs, I don't know, all of the chains of minerals and vitamins and everything else. Simple language I'm using here. But basically, it has needs in order to exist. So that molecule, this is what it needs on the outside. So there's a few layers. And what happens is they kind of get compressed, and they start to crouch down. They're becoming more hard, they're not as pliable. They're not floating around as freely as they once were in our youth. So going into a hyperbaric chamber and doing that kind of or similar work physically is giving the exterior part of the cells more energy in order to sort of wake up. But then what you can do at the same time is think about the God particle, because at the center of that cell is the God particle. But you can't sometimes reach that to go outward. You have to sometimes go, oh my gosh, I'm a little heavy right now. If you think about that language, people say that, oh, I feel so heavy. Why am I so heavy? They need to lighten their energetic makeup in order to access some of that information that lies within our cells, because it's all communicating with everything that's around us. And really, here's the thing, is that this kind of information is the most powerful part of quote disclosure. And if disclosure is not talking about who we are and the technology that we have as human beings in order to tap into it, then disclosure is not happening. And so whoever controls the disclosure topics controls how much information people receive. And the ultimate goal is to have humanity in this process of awakening to remember all of this information, to remember what the God particles are and the healing particles and the energy and how we relate to all of it. It's not about what a UFO looks like or even what these extraterrestrials look like. It's not even about where they're from. It's about us remembering how to work with the energies that exist around us in order to create the miraculous life that we are here to live.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think people need to really appreciate that. Yeah, we do need to be inspired to go through that inner transformation.
I have something else that I want to add to this that I think is seriously important for this time. One of the most important things I could share with your listeners. Okay, I want to tell the story about what happened when I was at an Awake and Aware conference with Carrie Cassidy. Okay, and this has to do with the God particle. So I was at the conference and I felt this weird energy getting directed towards me, and I didn't know what it was. It was really awful. Okay. And I was on stage and I felt really sick all of a sudden. It was like it just hit me and I thought, whoa, it was like someone was literally sending some kind of waves through me. And what that was, it's kind of, whatever it was, I don't know. I ran out of the room. I almost vomited. And then I heard these beings come into my head and they told me what to do. And I was like, okay. And I did it and I felt better. I'm going to tell you what it is, but let me build up the story here. The next day, I was somewhere outside the conference room and some of the people working at the conference came running after me saying, oh my gosh, they're calling you up on the stage. And so I went up on stage because the people that were presenting were feeling this again. Okay. And I was like, whoa, this is heavy duty. So I did the technique and I pushed the energy back out. And I had 3 other people. I was at the, on stage, 2 at the side and 1 at the back. And I had them all doing the same thing because it was so strong. And that during that whole time, I was like, okay, it's gone. I felt it. It was gone. I felt it. I never verbalized anything. Then we did the technique and I did it and I had it go away. Then all of a sudden, the person next to me who was also feeling it said, oh, thank God it's gone. And I was like, okay, first check mark. Then all of a sudden I felt it come back, and at that exact moment they turned to me and they said, oh my God, Miriam, I can feel it again. And I said, okay, let me do this. So I did the technique again. During one of the panel discussions, when I was sitting up on stage, I felt it come and I was like, forget this isn't going to happen. And I did it again to myself and I pushed it out really powerfully. And that exact moment, what happened was all the lights poofed on and off. The microphones popped out. They no longer were working. The cameras in the room also blipped out for a moment. And they said, oh, I don't know what happened here. Something just happened. And it was that technique. And what I was told was that this particular technique that works with the God particle, okay, has the ability to protect you from everything, almost everything, including Are you ready for this? Technology. So it can protect you from technology because it is the most powerful particle that there is. And what I was told to envision is golden particles, okay, that look like they're the DNA strands, right? It looks like a DNA strand. And what you're doing is you're sending one strand going down, coming out from, above, going in your head, spiraling down through your body, through your core, and it goes into the earth. And then once it goes into the earth, it expands out. And then a second DNA strand coming up through the earth with the golden light particles that are all connected, and then spiraling the opposite direction. So you have two of them that are going opposite directions, right? And they're spiraling through you and then expanding out. And so this to me demonstrated that you can protect yourself from, let's say, for example, even radiation from the technology that we have around us. And it's a really great way of being able to cleanse yourself and your sort of area. But let me caution you, though, because if you don't, this is not something that, you have to be careful with the God particle, that you're using anything that you're using it for is not for anything in a negative nature, because it will come back and it will do a boomerang effect, and it'll come back and end up having ramifications.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So if people wanted to kind of like learn how to do that technique, is there an exercise? Is there instructions for how they can practice that? Because, I mean, that sounds like something you might need a little bit of coaching on for many listening to this. How would you do that? I mean, envisaging kind of counter-rotating spirals going through the body.
You're absolutely right, because even though I've shared this, there's a lot more to the actual technique to understand, how do you really use it in a powerful way. I've been in the process since January, working almost every single day on building out some virtual events that I'll be having coming up into the future. I also have courses that are coming in order to do to give some of these teachings, because I think it's the right time for people to hear that. But I don't have anything at this exact moment. But it is a lot of this information I'm going to be sharing with the public for the very first time. I'm working very hard to try and do that, but it takes time to put it all together.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, when you do that, let me know and we'll get the word out.
Thank
you. I just want to go back to the discussion we were having about the end times and humanity being rescued. And of course, we talked about the Tourbillons, these giant spacecraft or space arks rescuing people. But there's also legends, Hopi legends, of the ant people coming up and rescuing people. So, and I've been working with someone who's currently serving in the US Army, and he says he's been on several missions where he's met these ant people, and they have civilizations down there. So, yeah, well, what can you tell us about the ant people?
Well, in terms of it being specifically from the Hopi, I know that there are these legends and mythical stories of the ant people. And there are different indigenous people that have talked about these ant people as well. It's also very well documented in petroglyphs and sculptures that they've made all over the world. So, we know that they exist. In terms of who and what these beings are, I think this was one of the things I mentioned on social media for us to discuss, is the underground civilizations that we currently have on the planet. When I had the experience in 1988, one of the things that took place shortly after that was myself. I was in a really powerful, deep meditation. and I was pulled out of my body and went into the astral world. So it wasn't a physical experience, but it was absolutely incredible because I was taken to a location that was under the earth. And when I was there, I was on a shoreline, and it looked as though, if you think about the way that the ocean presents itself, the way that it looks and acts, there's this rocking of the waves, whereas a lake doesn't do that. It can be completely still. So that's what it was like. It was like the rocking of the waves of a very small, calm ocean that I was looking at. And we were on a beach-like area. And across, really far in the distance, I saw what appeared to be almost like a sun. That was a small sun that I was looking at. And it was under the earth. And I believe that, it had to have been, and again, I'm sort of assuming this, but it had to have been some sort of a constructed location, because I don't see how it would have been natural or on another, that it would have naturally have been there. And the energy that was there, they took me there and they said, this is where we are. This is one of the locations that you can find us. So I've been asked, even by different Hopi people, actually, about what I know about the people that live underground. And what I can say is that they are definitely here. And I am very, very well aware of a couple of locations of them. One specifically that is off the coast of Florida. It's not really in the Bermuda, like where Bermuda is. It's further north and a little bit east, I think. And there's definitely an underground water base there. And it's not under the water itself, but actually under the earth itself. So I know that there's something there. And there has to have been the North and the South Pole, because they have the massive electromagnetic, the way the whole planet is sitting on the rotating. I can't find my words, sorry, because I have too many images going through my mind right now. Just a second. What ends up happening is that there are only specific places on the planet that they can create these underground bases, because if they were to go and create them in the wrong areas, what would happen is that the rotation of the Earth itself would not be able to continue rotating at the proper speed and even in the proper direction. So these bases are not just willy-nilly all over the place. They have to be in certain areas. It's also it's like saying different pockets of air within the planet itself. I haven't had a lot of experience myself with these underground beings. What I can say is that I definitely know that they exist, and that what I just described is one of the locations that I was taken to at the time, many years ago.
That location you mentioned, what it brought to mind is that the US Navy has a facility on Andros Island, which I believe is part of the Bahamas, in that kind of approximate area that you mentioned, kind of like just a little north of the Bermuda Triangle and to the east. And this is called ORTEC, the Advanced Underwater Testing and Evaluation Center, and that the Navy has this huge facility there. It's like their area, their version of Area 51, and there's a lot of things going on. So it sounds like this underground facility is roughly around there. So I don't know if that makes any sense.
Well, I have a rough sketch of some weird thing that I drew when I was 22 that points right to that. And they said it's, if you saw the picture, you'd be like, it's pointing right to it. So it's interesting that they have that base there, because as we know, there's a lot of information exchange that's already taking place between these beings and different government, in my opinion, different government groups. And, again, it's powerful information and technology, but also, do we not have the most powerful information and technology that's taking place right now with AI manifesting and all sorts of new healing technologies that are coming out? I mean, take a look around us. There's been a technological explosion, and it has not been in the last 100 years. It has been within the last 25 years. If you think about where we were 30 years ago, it was just at the beginning of being able to build, laptops and computers. So think about that. In 30 years' time, we have had this absolutely mega explosion of the most extraordinary technology on the planet. It has to be coming from somewhere. It can't simply be that humanity has all of a sudden woken up and thought, oh, this is great, let's do this. If you look at who owns the different technologies and who brings those technologies out into the public, and look at the different corporations and how long they've been in history, and then government contracts that they've had, you start to see things a little bit differently for how, the world is being constructed. And then take into account how this disclosure that people are talking about, that might be, they think is going to take place in the next couple of months, because, quote, the United States Congress has said, okay, release the information. I mean, come on, it's not going to be released. It's not going to be released. They'll give the people something, but it's not going to be released, because the most powerful information that could be released in terms of what disclosure is has to do with the energy that these, quote, UFOs are emitting, how that energy is interacting with the world around us. It has to do with the technology. It has to do with it being able to manifest and grow. It has to do with being able to control your mind. If you can control your mind, then you understand how simple and easy it is to control someone else's mind. And that's a fact. Ask any kind of I don't know what they're called, the people who do the mind tricks, and then they go to, I can't remember what they're called, but it's about being able to understand how the brain works and then relates to the world around us. And have we not learned in the last 30, 40 years, people coming out saying, oh yeah, there was this government study and this government study and this government study. When we take a look at the military that have done remote viewing, they've done psychic programs. The Russian psychic army that I talked about, they were talking about using sonar, how to use sonar, because the dolphins and whales use it to communicate and change and shift things that are around them. When we look at radio waves and electrical waves and all of this relates to what disclosure actually is. And I think that that's really the message that out of our interview today that I would love for people to really grasp, is that disclosure is not going to be, nor should it be, our conversation about who these beings are or what the crafts look like. It needs to be about what is the actual core of information that is being withheld from humanity, or is it being withheld? Is it being a slow roll release? Because we know that there's more than one group on the planet that wants to control the flow of this information. And everyone has access to it through themselves. There's nothing that can be hidden if you are powerful enough to be able to access the knowledge of these, what I call universal energy centers. that have this knowledge that you can actually take with you and download it. But you have to prep your mind, you have to prep your body physically, because once that energy comes in and you start to work with it, like you said, Michael, is there's a course that would teach you how to use this spiraling God particle energy. You can't just use it and think that you're going to be okay, because what will happen is your body, your physical body, has to be prepared. It has to be prepped in order to be able to really bring through that energy and then utilize it in this reality that we live in called Earth, and then understand how it relates to everything. And 10, 15 years ago, if I would have tried to have a conversation about this kind of information, I think I would have had a lot of blank stares. And so there has been this massive shift in terms of people understanding that there are these very important connections, but there has to be caution as well in asking ourselves, what is the point of the questions that we are asking, Michael? What is the point of the questions? I think that if there are underground bases here, that we have a right to know at some point, and they have to tell us at some point that there's some kind of interaction that's taking place. But I don't see it happening this year at all on any level.
Yeah, definitely. It's a slow process. Now, on my Twitter feed, I posted something about metamaterials recovered from a UFO crash dating from 1947. And there had been studies done on this metamaterial. It had a layer of bismuth in it. And what the study found was that when they projected terahertz waves at it, it would just levitate. And I remember you actually commented, you said, oh, I have something to share about that. So yeah, can you tell us what's going on with bismuth and terahertz waves?
Well, I can't necessarily answer those two questions, but the reason I asked you to bring it up was because there is an extraordinarily powerful connection between whatever the material happens to be and then sound waves, okay, the different waves and the different types of particle waves that we have that are going through our existence here. For example, I believe that the stones, for example, that built the pyramids were levitated through sound. I also believe that the stones, for example, in, I don't know if it's Peru, where they have the stone walls that look like they're melted together, and they don't know how they did them. That, again, is a form of sound. And what happens is every element that exists has corresponding sounds that have the potential to transform them into something or do something, okay? And when you use those energies in order to direct them at a particular type of material, there will be some sort of a reaction. And the simplicity of it goes back to the opera singer who releases sound and then cracks the glass. It is that concept, except it's really, really precise information that you need in order to get a particular type of material or combination of materials in order to have it react in a certain way. So that, I know, is a fact, And if your viewers go and do a little bit of a deep dive research on this between sound and levitation, they're going to start pulling that up. They're going to start seeing that there are studies being done on that. And then take it to the next levels where you have to say, okay, we have the ability through sound in order to transform some of the things that are around us. Now, things that are not sentient, that don't have thought, can be transformed through, because even they have that God particle. This is universal law, right? We're going back to universal law. So they have the ability, you can shift and change, you can transmute them, is that the right word? For example, changing a rock from one color to the next, you can do that through thought, which is actually a sound wave. It's a wave. Thought is waves. They are waves being sent out from our bodies and our minds all the time. So these particular craft that have this energy structure, I think that this might be, this might be one of the craft that was alive at one point, and it's like a liquid energy almost that some of these craft are, and that was one that I was on. It was not made from a physical substance like rock and water. It was made from some kind of energy that was alive, and it had the porousness like sense of it, right? And because of that, there is communication through sound or thought, that enables the controllers of that craft in order to move it. Okay. This, I suspect, is maybe a piece of that type of a craft that has been condensed, and therefore it has changed its form slightly from being more of that. Instead of being in liquid form, it's more of a dehydrated substance, and so it's not acting identically to what it would have been had it have been in the craft as a whole.
To me, that this study that was being done on metamaterials being flooded with terahertz waves. Now, I wasn't sure by terahertz waves if that's a sound, particular sound frequency or electromagnetic frequency. I don't know which it used, but that it would levitate the material. And so it made me think, well, would there be particular frequencies generated on planets which could create this as a natural effect? And what I'm thinking about is, I don't know if you've heard of Elena Danaan, but she's also a contactee, and she says she was told, given information about these floating rocks or mountains that were used for building bases on Saturn, and that they just float. They're just floating mountains. And that immediately made me think of the floating mountains illustrated in the Avatar movie. Right. And it's like, well, if you have something like the rings of Saturn, and they're generating frequencies, lots of frequencies. So could they be generating these terahertz frequencies there, so that rocks on Saturn, which have particular elements like bismuth in it, that they'll just levitate. So you'll have whole mountains levitating, and so this is where they built these huge bases in Saturn. So I don't know if that's something anything about, but it's truly fascinating.
I'm not familiar with that. What I would say is that that the technology that a lot of these groups have, some of the builders, let's call them, they would be using technology that would be as fantastical as that in order to terraform different planets and be able to do, continue to in order to continue to monitor the entire solar system, they would need a lot of those materials. And so I would imagine that something like that may be possible, but I am not familiar with that process that she was sharing.
Okay. Well, there was another social media post I shared. This concerned a paper. A scientist or a group of scientists said that tachyons are now theoretically possible and that they're consistent with or Einsteinian physics. And I thought that was very interesting, that tachyons are these, they've been regarded as these hypothetical, faster than light particles. And so there's been lots of theories around them. But in terms of researching secret space programs, apparently the Germans learned how to utilize tachyons, and that they used these with some of their craft, and that they were able to, when they developed the secret space program, they were able to actually utilize this kind of tachyon propulsion system so that they could travel back in time prior to leaving on missions, so that they could see. So the captain would he gets his mission orders, and so before flying off to some mission somewhere, he would wait for himself to return from the mission, and once that he saw he returned, then he would go. So I don't know if you have any insights on that.
So again, it's talking about, if I understood you correctly, because I never, I never know the scientific lingo, but I can explain what I'm in more simple terms. So tachyons, when you're saying tachyons, you're talking about a specific type of energy that allows for them to be able to do all of this, that is unknown to, that you're saying that we don't tap into at this moment, but scientists are getting to the point where they're agreeing that they exist. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that they previously thought that this was just a theory, a possibility, but now they're finding that, yes, they can exist, and that they would be consistent with Einsteinian physics. And I thought that was interesting because people have said, well, there have been whistleblowers who have said that the Germans learned how to utilize tachyons for their spacecraft, and they were given that information from extraterrestrials.
It sounds to me like that's the God particle. It sounds to me like there's an element of that in there. Okay, so I don't think that all of this massive information to that degree was given to the Germans. I think that they were given a lot less information, and that they ended up starting to play with the information that they were given. I think that they used it as a basis in order to create some of the technologies that they did. But I also, one of the horrible things about Germany and the Second World War is that it would make sense that they absolutely did have in some sort of interaction with some of these beings, because they ended up going crazy about the quote Aryan race. And I don't understand. I've never been able to personally understand where that came from. But when you look at it in terms of, quote, the UFO contact that they had, it sort of starts to come into more, at least some kind of understanding, I think, in terms of how they could have come up with such a ridiculous conclusion. But I'm not personally familiar with what happened in that part of history in terms of the UFO contacts and Germany. What I can say is that there was so much information given to different governmental groups around the world about these technologies and the basis of how they work. And I 100% believe that they've all been trying to understand it ever since and build and grow from it, which is where a lot of the black projects probably come from, and secret, secret groups that have had that have been working with maybe some of the extraterrestrials, including areas such as Area 51, and maybe this base that is off the coast of Florida. But there has to be a lot of different ways in order for these scientists to be able to understand. But even for the scientists, what I know as a fact is that in 36 years ago, when I was talking about how the physics worked with the testing that they were doing at UBC at the time, when I was talking to this physicist, and I was telling him, oh, if you do this reaction, I can't remember what it was that I was even telling him. I just remember the premise of the story was, you do this, this is what the reaction is. You do that, this is what the reaction is. And he said to me, how do you know that? And I said, well, that's basics. That's the most simple science there is. And so if the scientists and the human, this is what I'm talking about, the human mind, right? If we don't have the base in order to understand the information that's being relayed, you can't actually tap into it and utilize it because you don't understand how to process that information. So every year we're getting more and more rapid in terms of even the science and scientists to be able to understand the information and knowledge that these extraterrestrials have shared for an extraordinarily long period of time. And looking at tying it in with indigenous knowledge keepers and what they were told about the universe, they didn't relay it in, quote, scientific terms. They relayed it in energetic terms of how everything fits together. And that's what makes some of these indigenous peoples, with their ceremonies and their way of life, still to this day very powerful. And it makes gifted people who are being able to tap into this understanding of this knowledge also very powerful, because they're understanding the science. And part of the science is, these tachyons and how you can gather them, you can bring them together, you can build things with them. And in order to control them, you have to understand a whole nother thread of science in order to in order to be able to observe them enough, and then create the environment upon which you would be able to hold that energy. And a lot of it has to do with spiritual concepts.
People who might think about the Germans and tachyons might think, well, there's no way those guys had that kind of advanced technology. And the thing is that the Germans understood way before it became popular in the West the importance of consciousness for being able to access and utilize many different technologies. And the Germans, I think they were already experimenting with developing consciousness to be able to build spacecraft. So it would make sense that the Germans understood the idea of the God particle, and of course they may have given it a different name. They may have talked about vril or something like that, or frill, but they understood that the way you control that is through consciousness rather than kind of like metal technologies. And because of that, they could do these incredible things like, being able to build craft that could go through space-time and arrive at their destination prior to their departure, stuff like that. And that was all through consciousness, and whether you call it the God particle, a tachyon, or you might call it frill, or something else, or the black sun. I mean, they talked about the black sun energy as well. So yeah, I think there's a whole kind of like a set of concepts there that need to be unwrapped in terms of our ability to utilize consciousness to control these spiritual forces and energy, and then to be able to apply that through technology.
Well, it's being applied every single day. You know, it's being applied every single day at all times. I mean, if I pick up my cell phone and I'm on the cell phone, right? Here's my phone. It's very, very interesting because what's attached to this? Nothing. So there's something going through the air that I can't see. It's giving me all of these pictures and videos and all sorts of information, right? And it brings us sound and it makes music. So think about that. That's pretty remarkable. And 100 years ago, that would have been not just a miracle, but a miracle of miracles, right? 150 years ago. So when we think about, when people talk about energy, sound waves, extraterrestrials, UFOs, they're all in the same thread of knowledge based in science, not in theoretical science, but in actual science. And then I don't call it theoretical science because to these extraterrestrials, they've already used the theory in order to create the things that they've done. And so that's not theory anymore. It's actual, let's say, science. And we have to get to the point where we understand that when we put a thought into our minds and we are constantly thinking it, we can take it from its confined space here and push it out into the world. And when that happens, it doesn't happen in silence. It doesn't happen without motion or movement. It happens because all of the elements of that exists are there. It's structured so that it can make a chain reaction, and the way to do that is to create waves. And the way to make waves is to line up those different types of particles. So we're actually doing that every day. We're doing that all the time. And if you really sit down and think about it, that's what we are creating right now. Again, I'll take it back to this and say, this is the greatest part of disclosure, is who we are, what this information can give to us, how we can tap into it as individuals and learn to control it and learn to use it in order to create the world that is around us. And, you know, I'm blessed because I've had a lifetime of experiences that demonstrate to me that these patterns and these ways of shifting energy around us and communication and travel and everything else. I've had so many profound experiences that, I mean, I could, every day practically, I can write a story. I could write a book just about a single one of my days, about how it works and the what appearance of miraculous is. But I want to share this also. I literally had, and I don't know if I talked about this on the prior interview, where I was invited to do a presentation at a conference, and I declined because there was a woman that was stalking me, and I didn't want to be there for that reason. But 3 people, 2 of them were friends and the other one they didn't know, watched a 1.5 hours. They sat in the audience and watched this presenter for an hour and a half. And when it was done, the 2 people that were friends and the other person were talking, saying, "Oh my God, that was so amazing. It was incredible. You know, what happened here? Where is this presenter?" So they went to the organizer, and the organizer said they're not there. Well, the person that they watched for 3 hours on that stage was me. So, and that's not the first time that I've had that happen where people have literally sworn that they've met me in bookstores, they've met me walking down the street, that we talked, and the conversations usually revolve around very spiritual matters and very specific topics, and I'll leave it at that for now. But the point is that energy has the ability to travel and then manifest itself in another place if the energy, like you said, the tachyons, the God particle, the building particles, everything is connected, whether it's spiritually, coming down spiritually into physical manifestation, into this physical manifestation, but also physical manifestation in other dimensions and realms, realities, and planets. And all of these things can coexist and do coexist all at the same time. And it is a fact. Scientists know this. That is why they are desperate to try to crack open and find the center of these particles with the Hadron Particle Collider. They are looking for the God particle, and they're looking for the particles of energy that have the existence of everything that is there. So, big storyline. Thank you for letting me share that.
Sure. Yeah, the Hadron Collider, I mean, that's another topic. Maybe we should tackle that in a future interview, because it's a big one. I wanted to come to this ascension process, and a lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people want to know about it. People have been talking about ascension for many decades. I think it was the Law of One material in the early 1980s that was talking about both planetary and individual ascension, and they gave a kind of 30-year timeline ending with 2012, and then 2012 came and went, and we're still here. So what do you know of this kind of planetary and individual ascension process, and is there a timeline that you're aware of here?
There's two things that are happening simultaneously. One of them is group consciousness ascension awakening, and then the other one is the individual consciousness awakening. When people believe that let's just make sure that we're clear on the language. Ascension. The meaning of ascension is to rise, to transform and to rise. Yes, humanity is going through an ascension process as a group consciousness. And so there is this planetary awakening that has been taking place, and it's continuing, and it's never going to stop. It's going to continue to evolve more and more and more. But I think that a lot of people in the 36 years since I've had this information given to me have talked about this ascension process, where they believe that they are going to transform into a 5-dimensional, and then this dimensional, and this dimensional, and that dimensional being. And what I would say to each and every one of the people that thinks that and believes that and is trying to work towards that is, listen, it's about being multidimensional. It's not about leaving this behind and going in and becoming something else. Because I just shared with you the ability to transform yourself into another form and stand on that stage and give a 1.5-hour presentation. So that was not my physical body that was there. That was something else that happened. So transformation of ascension is, to me, and it always has been, about being able to tap into the different levels of who and what we are. And for me to be able to rise above my physical body in itself, to then travel into another dimensional world. That is ascension to me. And ascension to me is about expanding the understanding of what and who we are, so that we can work with those different energies, those different particles, those different sound waves that are around us in order to manifest, transform, transmute, shift, change all of the existence that surrounds us. So it is not a simple topic, ascension, because it's actually, from my perspective, it's one of the most misunderstood and confusing areas of this topic for UFOs and extraterrestrials, how it all relates together. And it's also one of the most confusing areas in terms of spiritual growth and growing your consciousness, because as long as you believe that you should leave this all behind, you're completely in kindergarten, because it's only when you realize that you're actually connected to all of it and that you are that multidimensional being. That's ascension. When you realize that you have access to that, that's ascension. Ascension comes with the realization of who you are, what you are, how you're currently predominantly existing in the moment, which is as human beings, and how you can expand your thoughts, your energy, your waves of energy in order to have that access to that information and knowledge. So as individuals, there have been individuals who have come for a very long time onto the earth who have a strong enough sense of that energy within them that they brought with them into their physical bodies in the form of a spirit and a soul. And then they were tapping into the energies and pulling more of it in, and more and more and more, and then releasing it with everything and everyone that's around them. And by doing so, eventually, instead of that person being dense and hard and heavy, they start to lighten up, because they're unconsciously taking in very, very, very slowly these molecules into their physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, soul, and spirit. It's eventually sort of touching them, and then reawakening this energy and helping them to grow, so that the brain is able to contact and have conversation with the rest of everything that's going on around you. So ascension is about the fully understanding who and what we are and being able to tap into that. And yes, there is an actual transformation that's happening to our physical bodies right now, where they are not aging as fast. They are healthier. People are living longer if you're tapping into that energy, because you're understanding that you are this multidimensional being. You can get the God particle and everything else. So this is a very big topic for me, because it's at the core. This is the core of everything that has to do with extraterrestrials and UFOs. This is the conversation that needs to be taking place when we're looking for disclosure, because it relates to how truly powerful we are, and that how we are really the most powerful technology on Earth.
Now, what you said is very similar to another contactee, George Cavassalis, and he says that ascension is very much a hierarchical process, because it's all predicated on the idea of achieving these kind of like higher levels, and that just creates hierarchy. And he instead talks about integrating with the fractal nature of who we are, that we are fully incarnated fractals of the omniverse, and that all we need to do is to kind of like realize, as you were saying, who we truly are, that we are fractals of everything. So it's not a matter of escaping from anything, because we are all of that. So it's just understanding that and just kind of like easing into that or integrating that information. So it sounds like he and you have a very similar take on the ascension process, and as opposed to like being able to connect with, the fractal nature of who we truly are.
I think that's beautifully a beautiful share, talking about fractals, because I love fractals, and how that does actually create the interdimensional connection to everything. Absolutely. It's a very, very, very interesting process that has to take place, but everyone has free will, right? You have a choice as to whether or not you want to tap into that energy or whether you don't want to tap into that energy. And whether you are committed to finding answers or not. There are so many variables in this, but ultimately you can't escape it entirely, because over time, more and more people are choosing to seek out this powerful knowledge. And the more people that seek out this powerful knowledge of the existence that everything is out there and how it relates to extraterrestrials, aliens, UAPs, and everything in between, science, technology, consciousness, and raising consciousness, when people commit themselves to that and they're starting to put the pieces together, it kind of creates the engine that's going to be pumping out even more and more and more information as it grows. So everything around that individual is being affected. So in essence, the ones that are kind of being left behind and they're saying, nah, I'm too lazy. No, I don't want to do that. They're getting pulled along. Everybody's going to end up coming on board. The question is when, how, and what does it look like? And I know that there are a lot of issues in our world that we are facing right now in terms of divisions and differences of opinions and different viewpoints, but ultimately nothing and no one can stop a human being's consciousness from rising.
That is really very comforting, and I think we are headed for some truly amazing revelations. Now, we've kind of like reached the end of our time, so I just wanted to give you the opportunity, if you have any kind of final words of encouragement, or maybe tell people about some of your upcoming events and your website, of course.
Thank you. Well, first, I'd like to thank you for being here, because I truly enjoy our conversations. I find it, the questions that you're bringing up and the value that you're bringing to the conversation with your knowledge enhances the ability to bring this message to everyone. I really want to leave everyone with the thought that, we're in this massive shift on the planet, and not to give up hope, but to understand that through chaos comes change, and to really focus on your own spiritual connection, because that is the most powerful tool that you can build for yourself in being able to determine what's right for you moving forward in your growth on the planet. And I tell the people around me, if I ever say that it's over, it's probably over. But there's no way. We're in a really good place right now, and I see so many incredible, positive, beautiful things that are taking place that I have a tremendous amount of positive thinking about the future, but we have to get through this bumpy road. So think about that. And then just to invite everyone again to come to my website, bluestarprophecy.com, sign up for my newsletter. You get a free download of my book, Blue Star Fulfilling Prophecy. And also to know that I'm working hard on these upcoming events where you'll be invited through the website, social media, and the newsletter. And it's also an opportunity through the newsletter to ask me questions, because every week I'm answering 1 or 2 questions. So please sign up and send in the questions, because I'm having a lot of fun doing that. And thank you again for having me on the program. It's just been amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you, Miriam. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, and you definitely are just full of many insights and great integrity and sincerity in dealing with these very complex topics. So it's wonderful to hear from you, and I look forward to our next interview.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.